Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP FoodSense webinar. So we do this webinar every Wednesday at about 8 a.m. London time. Sorry, I went a little bit late today, but we do it every Wednesday about 8 a.m. London time. And it's really just to kind of cover technical questions that have come in during the week. So today's the 24th of January, and we will cover the questions. Just to say, there is actually a live streaming demo tomorrow of actually the FoodSense online as well, and hopefully I've got a link to that. Something that I want to cover today is a couple of questions that have come in during the week. So as I say, if you see a link now, I'll try and remember to put this underneath the YouTube video as well. But it's just to kind of say that we do have a live demo tomorrow. And so if you want to see the FoodSense in, let's say, action, then you can capture that tomorrow. The FoodSense Generation 4 has certainly come a long way since we first launched it. The hardware's got more easy to use. The user experience is much more guided through the LEDs on the front. It's easier to get the sensors in and out of the device. In the top left hand video in a minute, you'll see that we can easily take apart the device. So if some powders or sauces get spilt onto that device, it's very easy to clean. So you can see me clicking the sensor in and out there. The other aspect of this as well is that this is very cloud enabled these days. So I am specifically talking about the FoodSense Generation 4. Just out of interest, you can see the device can be taken apart here as well. But with the FoodSense Generation 4, there is an app on both the Android store and also, or the Google Play Store, and also on the Apple App Store. Now that app drives the meter gets the data back, and the meter sends all of the data to the cloud, which is then behind your username and password. And then the other thing to say as well is the FoodSense Generation 4 can also do ginger as well as chili or capsaicin in ginger, capsaicin rather in chili powders. Let me go forward a little bit more. This is what the FoodSense Generation 4 looks like. So there is an app on the Google Play Store. If you're watching this video, you can rewind this video and scan this code. And if you're using an Apple iPhone or an Apple device, iOS device, you can use this code and that will install it. We do have these QR codes. So when you get the device, if you ordered Chilli Sensors, you'll get a QR code you'll get Chilli Sensors and a QR code. The QR code tells the app to run the chili assay. If you order ginger, you get a QR code plus ginger sensors, and the app and the QR code will tell it to run ginger. And we also have TAS, total antioxidative status, as well. As I say, I do have some specific questions to answer today, but the workflow on the FoodSense Generation 4 is really sort of very up to date, very modern, like let's say, because you get the sensor, you get the meter, you get the app, and there's also a cloud system called Julie behind this, and so all data actually goes to Julie. So you put the sensor into the meter, you put the sample on the sensor, you run the hardware through the app, and the app gets the data and it actually sends you the results to the cloud. Now in the cloud you get the Scoville heat units. Sorry, on your phone you get the Scoville heat units, but in the cloud we actually get the raw data. So this really helps to verify that what the meter is saying is accurate, because actually we can see the raw data. And at the moment I've got the capsaicin raw data running, and it's very distinctive, the capsaicin raw data. We kind of get these peaks. And if you want to know more about this, there's actually a bit of there is a live streaming demo tomorrow where we dig into this in a lot more detail. Again, I'll put the link to that video, to that demo underneath this video at the end. So there's all the raw data goes to the cloud, and therefore you can share it with your own team, or you can actually share it with ZP as well. You can invite us to look at it, and it really helps us with support. Now what we do is everyone gets personalized online training. So if you're a FoodSense Generation 4 customer, you get personalized online training. We do weekly webinars, so if a question comes in from a user, we will answer it in the weekly webinars. We do monthly webinars, so tomorrow there is a demo, which I think is worth coming, and then everyone gets 2 hours per month for the first 12 months of support. Sometimes you find this support is not really, strictly speaking, it's more about statistics actually. So we do a lot of standard deviation calculations or relative standard deviations, or just even things like averaging results. So we do find that the support tends to be not so much on the product but the use of data in general. So the questions I've got today is what's the resolution? What resolution of Scoville heat units can humans determine, and how to measure 100 Scoville heat units? By the way, 100 Scoville heat units is extremely low in terms of the scale. I mean, the scale is essentially 0 to 16 million, so 100 is really low. Question number one of the customers measures the spiciness using our chili sensors, and again has obtained results showing a 200 Scoville heat unit difference between them. But they believe that human beings can actually perceive greatest distinction between these samples. And would we suggest that suggesting that spiciness should be higher than 200 Scoville heat units recorded with a chili sensor? It's really hard to this one. So I think that human beings can probably. First of all, I'll describe. First of all, the Scoville heat unit starts off with a gentleman called Wilbur Scoville, who wrote a paper in 1912 on the determination of the spiciness of, let's say, chilies. And what he's done is he's sort of got this protocol where you extract the capsaicin, and then you progressively dilute the capsaicin, and you have a taste panel of about 5 people who are constantly tasting these continuous dilutions, and they're actually you determine the Scoville heat units when 3 of the 5 panel can no longer determine the hotness of the product. So if you've diluted it 50,000 times before 3 people can't taste it, then that's 50,000 Scoville heat units. Now, when in the reality, what that means is you start with 5 people. They can all taste, let's say, the chilies. Then you dilute it. And in fact, all 5 people can still taste it. Then you dilute it a bit more. And then only 4 people can taste it, let's say. Then you dilute it a bit more, and let's say only 3 of them can taste it. And then you dilute it a bit more, and only 2 of them can taste it. At which point now, you're done, because on this 4th dilution, 3 people can no longer taste it. So in fact, the Scoville heat unit here is proportional to dilution times dilution 1 times dilution 2 times dilution 3 times dilution 4. So what am I saying here is I'm saying that this idea that most people can discern 200 Scoville heat unit differences, it's a really hard experiment to actually do. And I don't think that, and I've looked for these kind of experiments, I don't really think that it's ever been done. So you might have an anecdotal impression that people can determine 200 Scoville heat unit differences, but I'm not convinced that anyone's actually done the experiment. And when you look at the way, let's say, this is an organoleptic test. When you look at the way this Scoville organoleptic test is run, I really don't think that you could actually say, that this test would be able to tell you that most people could discern the differences between 200. So I don't think that most people can discern the difference between 200s. Now, what I think is, and I'll give you an example, is that if we take Tabasco sauce, and if we test it, and we tested a lot of Tabasco sauce over the years, it's just an easy test for us to do. When we're doing product improvements or product testing and stuff like that, you can get some Tabasco sauce out and you can just test it. It's quite, it's all homogenized. It's quite easy to test for us. And when we test it, we get scores between 2,000 and 5,000 and 5,500. 5,500. So we take Tabasco, we test it, we get scores between 2,005 and to 5,500. And then if you look on Wikipedia, you find out that the company tries to ship it within the range 2,500 to 5,000. But what I noticed, this is just my opinion, is that whenever I tasted Tabasco sauce, I've really never actually been able to say, oh, that's really hot. Oh, that is, that's hotter than the last bottle of Tabasco sauce. I've never really had that. Now that's what we call a sort of N of 1. That's one person giving one opinion. But I would say that, over the years I've eaten Tabasco sauce, I've never noticed actually differences between bottles. But we can see the difference by measuring the capsaicin directly. We do it quite regularly and we do see the difference, but I can't perceive the difference. So I do understand the question. The question here is that the machine is telling them that there's a difference of only potentially 200, but they think they can taste a difference greater than that. Now, it's hard for me to answer that, but what I would say is if they're on a FoodSense Generation 4, then they would put the sensor in there, they would put it on the meter, and the meter would run the assay, and the data would go back to the app, at which point then they would get their result. So Scoville heat unit. But what's really important is the raw signal goes to the cloud. They do never need to look at the raw signal, but the raw signal is really important, see, because it always tells us the truth in the end. It's not just a number on the screen that you otherwise have to just believe. There's actually a raw signal behind this. And so only with Generation 4 do we actually get access to the raw signal. At which point then, they can actually share it with, they can invite us through the cloud system to actually look at their data. And we can actually look at the data and say, is this actually making sense? I've got a question number 2 in a minute. And I think the question number 2 might put some light on this. Because what I'm wondering is, if these people are essentially under diluting their products, and so they've got a saturated signal. So they're not doing enough dilution in order to actually measure their product. So I'll discuss that in question number 1 at the moment. But the first question was, what's my opinion on what kind of Scoville heat units can people just determine? And I would say that anecdotally, Tabasco sauce is shipped in the range of about 2,500 to 5,000. And I don't think most people can tell the difference between that. So I think that you do have to have differences of possibly greater than 5,000 in order to actually have human beings be able to determine the capsaicin hotness. And I went around the internet looking to see if people were complaining about variability in Tabasco sauce, and I didn't find any forums or any discussions. Doesn't mean they're not there, I just haven't found them. So I haven't found anyone's really complaining that Tabasco is variable in heat, because I don't think that most people are sensitive enough to realize that they may be shipping it between 2,000 and 5,000 Scoville heat units. So I think that's really the kind of range. Something I didn't do is that I actually think that your perception of heat is not linear as well. I think it actually plateaus. When you get very hot, it's just hot and you're not going to be able to discern any differences. But I didn't do a slide on that, and maybe I should have added that slide as well. But as I say, if they were on a FoodSense Generation 4, the raw data that they have is actually in the cloud, and it would allow us to actually look at their data and actually determine what was actually going on if they were a little bit confused. There's a live demo tomorrow, so if you're a user of FoodSense Generation 3, please come to the FoodSense demo tomorrow. There's a demo of FoodSense Generation 4 as well, and I'll put that link underneath the video as well. This question number 2 has actually got some relevance to question number 1. So what this person here is trying to do is they're trying to measure out 100 Scoville heat units. First of all, 100 Scoville heat units is really low. I think mostly, we are dealing with people at the moment with chili powders of 1 million Scoville heat units. I think when I'm dealing with people in India with powders, chili powders, they're kind of 50,000 to 150,000 Scoville heat units. And then the sauces like Tabasco tend to be 5,000. So 100 is really, really quite low, at least on the scale of things that what we deal with. Now, what you'll notice is, and this will be in the demo tomorrow, if we take something like Tabasco sauce, we'll take 1 volume of Tabasco sauce and we'll put it in 9 volumes of buffer. So we've done a 1 in 10 dilution. If it's something a bit hotter, we may take 1 volume of the sauce or the powder and we'll dilute it in a larger volume. And the reason being is we're trying to get to the same concentration. So if you think it's really hot, we tend to use a larger volume. If we think it's really low, we use a smaller volume. So we have a bit of a rule that if we think it's 0 to 5,000 Scoville heat units, then we tend these days to do a 1 in 10 dilution. I realized in the past we used to say 1 in 4. But we've kind of broadened this out a little bit now and said 1 in 10. If we think that the product is a bit hotter and it's 5,000 to 50,000, we might do a 1 in 100 dilution. But if we think it's hotter than 50,000, we might do a 1 in 1,000 dilution. So this is kind of the numbers I generally tend to work with. So we have increased that dilution on the lower range. We have actually increased it. Now I'm going to get back to the question itself, which is really, they're asking, well, how do I test a 1 in 100 dilution, which is really not concentrated at all? And I'll answer that really here, because the reason that we're doing this dilution is that capsaicin is not terribly soluble. Capsaicin in water is soluble to about 500. I think this actually might be in 500 to 1,000 Scoville heat units, but it's not terribly soluble. So if somebody has a 100 Scoville heat units, it suggests that they may not even have to dilute at all, because actually the capsaicin is already at quite a low concentration, so they don't actually need to dilute. So if you're trying to do low, it means that you may not have to do either a very minimum dilution or actually no dilution at all. And that's how we can deal with quite a dynamic range. So let me give an example here. So what would happen is they would have their sensor, they would have their meter, they would have their app, and and the app automatically, by the way, connects to the database. So they put their sensor in there, they put their 100 Scoville heat units in there. The app will tell the meter what to do. The app will give the data back to the meter, and they will get a result on their phone of, let's say, 100 Scoville heat units. But again, what is good is that the data will actually go to the cloud. So if they're really confused or uncertain, they can invite somebody like ZP to look at that data and actually, to be able to kind of help them troubleshoot it. So that's the advantage of FoodSense Generation 4. And as I say, we do have a live streaming webinar on FoodSense Generation 4 tomorrow as well. The last thing I'd say about measuring 100 Scoville heat units, there is an HPLC method out there. HPLC is a really inexpensive equipment. The throughput of testing is really low when it comes to capsaicin determination. A lot of organic solvents. You need a lab to do this. You need probably like a master's grade chemist to do this. And it's quite hard. But actually what's interesting is that the minimum this method will do is 750 Scoville heat units. So just know that when you're talking about 100 Scoville heat units, you're actually below, the limit of detection for the HPLC system. So you really are only left with the FoodSense Generation 4 at that point anyway. So what resolution of Scoville heat units can humans determine? I suspect that humans can't really determine if you had two products and the difference between them is maybe 2,000 to 5,000, it might actually be quite hard for the human beings to determine this. It's very anecdotal, but I have based it on that kind of on that Tabasco sauce as the example. And how to measure 100 Scoville units, you basically probably don't need to dilute at all is the quick answer on that. So I want to say thank you. I will put the links, the link to the webinar tomorrow, I'll put it underneath this YouTube, let's say, streaming video. But if you've got questions, either contact us here or also come to the webinar tomorrow and see the FoodSense Generation 4. And if you are a FoodSense Generation 4 user, know that all your data is going to the cloud. So if you're really confused, if I can say, then the data is going to the cloud and you can actually share it with ZP and we can then actually help you troubleshoot. So if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much.